5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and everybody, welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast, live from the North Star recording studio here, where it is a humid 79 degrees. It's kind of a hot one down here tonight, but that's just the way that it is. This part of the studio is not air conditioned. It's just like in the old days. Hey, tonight we have Chad Elkins on the show, and actually Chad Elkins, we had a special show trailer designed here down in the studio for him, which we're going to try to show successfully in just a moment. But Chad has over 10 years of tax experience, including positions and engagements with the Internal Revenue Service, U.S. Tax Court, and U.S. Department of Justice Tax Division. He's a co-author of Elkins' Comprehensive Tax Guide. He is the oracle of Chicago finance with a penchant for observing nuanced trends in how humans manage the fiscal aspects of their lives. So a lot of you probably know Chad, from his many appearances with Aaron Clary and the Clary podcast, older brother, different shows. And in this interview, though, Chad and I are going to talk about unusual fiscal behaviors that he has seen as a certified public accountant, that he's seen from his clients, as well as overall trends in people. How people have altered their behaviors during the coronavirus, sometimes with drastic consequences to their fiscal portfolio for short-term or long-term. Different things that they've done with their money management strategies and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And we're going to really try to figure out, at the start, back in March, what were people doing? They give Chad a call and say, oh my God, stock market, is down to 17,000. I'm thinking about doing this. What are the consequences this could have on my, taxes and things like that? Versus now, what kind of things are they asking? What kind of long-term, short-term advice? Because it's really interesting how things have progressed with people in general, but we haven't analyzed this from a fiscal side. So that's really the gift that Chad brings to the show tonight. He also rides around Chicago on a talking moose, which he's kind of curtailed that since the civil unrest, because the moose does draw attention to him. So, it's kind of a cool thing, still reserved for parades, stuff like that. So, and it was reported he cleared $970,000 last year, at least on the show trailer he did. But he's a great guy. He's absolutely phenomenal. Again, most of you know Chad. You're already over in the chat, Red Mictobus Bacon. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to do a share screen and play this 1 minute show trailer, and this should actually work here. So give me just a second for those of you watching at home and not live here in the studio audience. All right, so this is a JBL portable speaker that I have. All right, if this all works, this is going to be really cool. So it's worth the effort here. I'm going to share screen. So this is the screen I want you to see, everybody. All right, that is the show trailer. That's the one that I had out there on Twitter. And let's give this a try. That is the show trailer. That's the one that I had out there. All right. On Twitter. And let's give this a Hey everybody, it's your good friend Dr. David Proden with the Safety Doc Podcast. This week's guest, Chad Elkins, CPA. Chad, welcome to the show. Dr. David Proden with the Safety Doc Podcast. Where are you from? This week's guest, downtown. Chad, how did you get here?
I got here on a talking moose.
Where are you from? I'm back here. Got a garden back. Chad, how did you get here?
I got here on a talking moose.
Listen, Elkins, that watch you have, that's a Disney magic band. These things don't even work anymore.
I made $970,000 last year.
Disney. Here's the materials I put together for the show. So I'm hoping we get a couple super chats. Maybe make $10 or $15.
I can go out there tonight. The materials you got make myself $15,000.
Chad, why did you agree to be on the Safety Doc Podcast? I mean, why are you here?
Why am I here? I came here because Mitch and Murray asked me to.
Thursday night, August 13th, 7 p.m., Chad Elkins live stream the Safety Doc Podcast. See you then. Hey, everybody. It's your good friend, Doc. All right. I tell you what, I just figured out the little relay thing at the start. So it's only a minute. Let's play it one more time, then we'll get going, because this is pretty cool. Yeah, here we go. Hey, everybody. It's your good friend, Dr. David Proden with the Safety Doc Podcast. This week's guest, Chad Elkins, CPA. Chad, welcome to the show.
Put that coffee down.
Where are you from?
I'm here from downtown.
So, Chad, how did you get here tonight?
I got here on a talking moose.
All right, dude, a talking moose? Really? Is it tied up in my backyard? I've got a garden back there.
You see this watch? That watch costs more than your car.
All right, listen, Elkins. That watch you have, it's a Disney Magic Band. These things don't even work anymore. Chad, how's the accounting business in Chicago?
I made $970,000 last year. How much you make?
Here's the materials I put together for the show. So I'm hoping we get a couple super chats, maybe make $10 or $15.
I can go out there tonight. The materials you got make myself $15,000.
Chad, why did you agree to be on the Safety Doc Podcast? I mean, why are you here?
Why am I here? I came here because Mitch and Murray asked me to.
Thursday night. All right. I hope it was worth it, because I usually don't do that. It was just cool. I don't want people to be able to go back and see that. And so anyway, what did you think, Chad?
I thought that was pretty awesome. I mean, I've only done streams with a few people, but nobody has ever introduced me as a guest quite like that. So that was pretty sweet.
You don't get that from the Clary podcast. A lot of things from the Clary podcast. You don't get a trailer like that, though. But yeah, I had fun doing it, putting that together. So it's cool. So give me your take on what you've been perceiving with the coronavirus, with civil unrest the last 100 days, finances, people. Where's their thought at? Again, you're a CPA. You've had clients for a long time, so you've monitored their behavior. What's some things going on that like most people probably aren't aware of or thinking about?
So, well, the first thing I want to say, like, as this almost goes without saying, this year, this 2020, I mean, this is just, there is no sense, not a single sense of normalcy in my field, and I'm sure in several other fields this year. Because I know I was looking at my calendar today and I saw that it was actually March 13th where everything like shut down here, where the governor was just like,
Yeah.
So exactly 5 months ago, this happened. And I'm thinking back to it, and I have to say, like, tax season had been pretty, I don't want to say easy, but pretty normal. Everything had been kind of rolling along. It was busy, but
okay.
It was just really, and yeah, everything changed after that, not just in my professional world, but almost everybody else's too. Yeah.
So what was like one of the first calls you received from one of your clients, like in mid-March? So, stock market's kind of in free fall. People are going to the stores, clearing off stuff. And businesses are having to lay off people. This is before we've got any type of stimulus bill out there, layoffs, and run me through like a couple of the calls where people are like, I've got to talk to you now. Like, call me back in the next 10 minutes, Chad.
So yes, there was, that did happen with a number of people. Well, the first things first, just for a little bit more background, the bread and butter of my practice are business owners and business owners
Okay.
who have, their own corporations. Usually they're called small business corporations, S corporations, but that's really what I consider my specialty. And I did get a lot of very panicking calls, and it depended on what type of business, what their business was. And I have about half of my businesses are therapists. They're neurotic already. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's about half are therapists. Then another, I'd say 15% are hairstylists. So I have more hairstylists and therapists as business owners than any other profession. And, the rest of my business clients are just, a hodgepodge of different ones. But it was both the therapists and hairstylists that were understandably freaking out as soon as this happened. Because they thought, remember, this was before Zoom and all the, work from home crap like that. We hadn't seen that yet. So they were genuinely like really scared about what was going to happen. So my job, I had to play therapist myself, for the therapist and be like, look, relax. I know that we're closed, but if we stay closed for a long time, there is going to be some help from the government. I'm not
Right.
saying it's going to be good help and help that makes sense, but there's no way that even with this tanking of the stock market, there's no way that they're going to let this many businesses fail without some help.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. Like the week after we shut down here, it was just constantly email conversations, phone calls, just trying to talk my business clients off the ledge. And I'll tell you a little bit later about how things ended up turning out with all this. But man, I do remember that week as being particularly stressful because March 15th is normally a big filing deadline for these businesses. So I was putting the finishing touches on that, and that's when the bomb dropped.
That is insane. So yeah, at what point? So you're talking about therapists, for example, hairstylists. At what point in Chicago did it come out where their industry was closed? Because I remember my hairstylist was saying, Dave, as of like Friday, I can't have clients anymore. The business has to close.
Yeah, it was all about the essential versus non-essentials, and so therapists, of course, ended up becoming essential. So they were fine. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But as you know, and I'm sure half the people watching this, or maybe all of them know, you could not get a haircut to save your life until June because it wasn't allowed, at least in my state. I'm in Illinois, in Chicago. And was it the same up there?
It was. Wisconsin, it was. And my sister-in-law is a hairstylist, has her own place. And yeah, everything had to be 100% shut down.
Yeah. So, I mean, understandably, they were all panicking. They're like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God!" And I had some new hairstylists talk about bad timing. They had just put all the money in and opened their doors like a week before that everything got shut down because of the pandemic.
God.
That one was particularly I spent a long time on the phone with her because that was bad. And then for the record, it's not really my job to be doing things like that. But I mean, they didn't really have anyone else to talk to who knew what might happen. So yeah, that was a rough week.
Yeah. Well, it's so you mentioned, they're coming to you and because they don't have anybody else to talk to you about kind of what's happening in their whole fiscal world, and they've put all this time in. And I had something similar happen. So I had someone I had worked with retired last year, her and her husband, late 50s. And, the moment the market was in free fall, 17, 18,000, I get an email from her and she's like, "Hey, can we talk right now?" Our finance, our portfolio and stuff. And I'm not, I don't have a financial background, I would say I understand finances because I've studied finances, so I can understand my own personal finance and things like that. But I'm in no position, I have no idea of what this portfolio is. And it just, but she said, "I can't get a response from my brokerage firm. They're overwhelmed. And, we were just seeing the market go down." And then, called me like 2 more times. So sent emails and called again. And then sent me another email. This is all in 24 hours saying, "I can scan everything as a PDF document and send it to you. And then you can analyze it." And I'm like, "I'm not doing anything for you. I understand you're panicked, you're scared." But yeah, it was just simply, she was wanting somebody to understand what they were going through. And I'm sure the brokerage places, and they're all overwhelmed getting calls and just telling people market, goes up, market goes down. These types of things have happened in the past. We can't predict where things are at, but it was really weird. I'm like, this is not something I would ever, do. So what did I tell her? I said, I said, just look back, I think 5 years ago, where was the stock market, which was about where there wasn't that big of a difference. And then I said something like, everything does have inherent value. So there is a basement in everything, Consolidated Edison, General Electric, Boeing, whatever. These things all do have basements because they do have assets. So they do have some value at some point, but it was weird, right? Because this was a person who was always very level-headed and then just lost it. And I wonder how many people made just rash decisions.
A lot.
Yeah. And now we have a market that has recovered, at least for now. And just, I guess as a stock market thing, but just other stuff, people making, really fast decisions without thinking it through. So yeah, give me some more, thoughts of, I guess, what was coming through, like in the general accounting world, maybe memberships that you belong with. What were people seeing? What were they maybe predicting? Was there some sense of, hey, there could be like banks closing. There could be, I guess, I don't know what from a CPA standpoint, what really got front and center on your radar of like, what do I need to do to be able to advise people? And
Well, the first thing that me and my colleagues started, placing wagers on as far as the date, we knew they were going to extend the tax season. Like the second that this thing dropped, because normally, of course, it's April 15th, and this all went down about a month before that. So without even thinking about it, some colleagues and I were joking, okay, so do you think we'll be working our asses off till June 15th or July 15th?
yeah,
Of course, it took them a few weeks. It was like 3 weeks, I believe, that they finally announced that they were going to push back the deadline. They had to. Like, the world was just like in chaos, in the sense that we didn't have any rules for anything, and so that was one thing that stands out in my mind, because we were like, yeah, we need more time to deal with this mess. There were a lot of people that, similar to your story, I had some people bail out and like totally get rid of their businesses, which was foolish. Because
absolutely.
yeah, I tried really hard to calm them down. I'm like, look, just wait, okay? And there were a lot of things that the government, very imperfectly, but things that they did try to provide in terms of relief, which I'm sure you and the listeners know about. But I mean, I had some people, mainly hairstylists, if I'm being honest, that they just couldn't take the anxiety. They just couldn't deal with it. So they went ahead and just shut everything down. And it's one thing if you shut things down temporarily, just to see what happens. No, I mean, they quit paying rent. They got their shit. They got their stuff.
No,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we curse on here? Or?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't get like totally crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, clarity thing. No, I'm
right.
No, and I was really upset about that. I'm like, just wait. But people couldn't handle not knowing, and so they're really kicking themselves now, because now that things are at least opening up a little bit, they're kind of like, what do I do now? And I said, I don't know. I guess you have to try to get a job working for somebody else, or you can try to get your old space back. So that was the most disheartening, was people that just gave up immediately.
So you say gave up. So giving up would mean they stopped paying on rental, stopped paying their vendors, and just discontinued everything, or bailed out of their space.
They didn't have enough money in reserves, and I get it. A lot of businesses are like this. It's turnaround. They didn't have enough reserve cash to kind of ride this thing out and wait for government help. And government help came, 4 or 5 weeks later in a number of programs, but they just couldn't deal with it. Everybody was so scared about not being able to make their rent, for where their shops were.
Right.
And so that they were just like, I can't afford the rent. I have to stop. And then they broke their leases, involuntarily. It just never went back. And it was just really disappointing to see that.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And an interesting part of this story was that, so that was hairstylist I was telling you about mainly, and some other in-person type businesses. Therapists, and so they were also freaking out. Therapists by nature are kind of neurotic, so they just can't handle anxiety. And the funniest thing happened was that one of the first laws that got passed pretty much in every state is that you weren't allowed to do what's called telehealth, where what we're doing right now, you're not supposed to be able to do that when it comes to psychotherapy. It's like not licensed or anything. It took about a week for this telehealth to be a reality. So my therapists are thriving better than they ever have before, because they don't have to see their patients in person, and everybody needs psychological help at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't have to rent space. They don't have to do a commute. All of those types of things.
Sure. Because they were worried about making rent. Everybody was worried about making rent, for their businesses. And suddenly it was no longer a factor with the therapist. So that was that.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. So I have a PhD from UW-Madison and work a lot in school safety chaos theory. But before I did that, I was and still am a licensed speech language pathologist,
Mm.
and I am able, through my license and some other licenses I obtained, to do therapy across several states via teleplatform.
Yes.
And I was approached in, well, probably like May, right? Because this demand was through the roof for different types of therapies. And would you be interested in doing a certain number of hours a week? You can do it from your house. We have the platform and everything. And those wouldn't have traditionally been there before because you're kind of restricted to if you're working at one facility, right? You had to physically show up there and provide your services in person, and you can be providing across state. And a lot of that has really been eased and changed. So it is fascinating as I look at that in my industry, because there are people now doing this and it's completely from their home, right? And they're being a therapist to people, they live in Missouri, but they're working in the morning with clients in Maine and in the afternoon clients in California. And what they're telling me is that they love it. They're really enjoying that aspect. And also, I mean, things get wonky and some face-to-face therapies, especially behavioral therapies. As a former school administrator, that was one thing we would have clauses. We'd have kids go out to mental health therapy, and the therapist be like, well, if they destroy my place of business, like, they're not welcome back. They go berserk and smash the lobby up or something, like, that's it, contract's done. And now, you don't have that as part of the consideration, but that is absolutely fascinating. So let me ask you this: do you think that is a permanent change from a virus? Do you think a year from now, no matter what happens, let's say things resolve, people have no restrictions on being able to go back to work, as far as like tele health, mental health, other teletherapies, do you believe that's where that industry has permanently kind of evolved to?
Specifically to therapy, I have to say, I think it has. They extended telehealth permission until the end of the year. Whether you have a pandemic or not, I think people will always have the option to come in and see their therapists in person, assuming, the therapists have an office. But I mean, the cat's out of the bag now that,
Right.
half of people's jobs, all the jobs, you don't actually need to be present for it. So I have to say, I think it's there to stay with the telehealth.
I had Chuck Mack on the show.
Yeah.
So Chuck Mack is works
Musician.
He does a lot of stuff. So it's interesting because I get little messages from him, and he collects like baseball jerseys. So whenever he gets like a new jersey, he's like, "Hey, I just picked up this Kirby Puckett," and he works IT for the University of Pittsburgh Medical. So during the early days of the coronavirus, so Chuck, I'm checking in with him, like, what's going on over there? He's like, oh man, like we have to scale up the building for Wi-Fi, and we've taken over this like additional building and for anticipated people coming in. But that never actually manifested. They didn't get overwhelmed with patients. But what did happen is, he said, we increased our telehealth tenfold. I had to get iPads, tablets, anything. And I'm sitting there just training people. I'm like, here's how to use it. Like, doctors, as you said, therapists, nurse practitioners who really had only kind of passively used it. Like, they were using it all the time, how to get it into, send it to clients with, directions on here's how to use it. And his take on that was, this will always be this way. Like, it will never fold back. You will have these options to come in and to see your provider and stuff. But he's like, this increase that they had will never come back to this previous baseline. And his thought was, as you indicated, cat's out of the bag. Technology was there. People are kind of slow to move toward that. Just propelled them there, and now they're there. So yes, that's a big. So as a CPA, someone comes to you and says, so my business model's changed, Chad. Like, I actually had a brick and mortar office, so I had to pay, heat, electricity, insurance on it, and things like that. And it looks like now I can do 80% of my job remotely. I'm probably going to need to share with somebody, go in and rent some space. So, maybe I have 8 hours a week of a face-to-face location. But what does that look like as far as like tax advice, things that you would tell them? I guess not to go detail, but like things you would tell them, okay, now if this is your model has changed, here's some new considerations for you. Like if you're going to be based out of your home and do this type of stuff, like here's some things you really should be thinking about.
So I have picked up quite a few new therapists between when this started in March and of course today. I guess word got around that I have mostly therapists, which is fine. But there have been a number of people who, they're just getting started and they're looking for office space or, space so they can see clients. And sometimes it's pretty expensive because you have to get furniture and all that stuff. After discussing it with a number of the new ones, we decided that there's no need to do that yet. Like just get some temporary space that's fully furnished. Maybe you can pay it by the week or by the hour or something.
Right.
Because I think there's going to be so few people that are going to continue to see their therapist in person. Like I think there's always a bit of lost energy, when you're not in the same room as somebody and you're having a discussion. But apparently with therapy, the patients couldn't be more happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes away that whole, I suppose too, like you don't have to go into a waiting room and then, interact with a receptionist. And I had like a routine doctor's appointment that was like an annual thing on Monday that I went to. And I was thinking this could have been done remotely, and at least like all of the paperwork, they're just like, could you fill like all of this out? It's like the updated stuff. Couldn't you just email this to me and just have me do it as like an email or PDF or like bring it in? And this feels like just really weird to have you hand this to me and sit here. And as other people are around me, I'm like, I just think you've kind of moved beyond this. But, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, so give me a couple more. A couple more stories of where people, so you had the initial couple of weeks of the coronavirus. Once people started to settle in, what were you seeing from them? I guess like how are they saying, I've got to adjust like long term now because it looks like things could be shut down or things could be restricted for quite a while. I'm not sure. What were people? Did they start to settle down, with their panic, or did they start to kind of just give up and say, yeah, business has been really slow here for 3-4 months. It's not really going to come back. So
you probably heard about these things. As I mentioned earlier, we knew the government, however imperfectly, was going to try to step in and prevent all these businesses from simply just quitting. So did you hear, I won't go into too much detail, but did you hear about these programs they implemented, the PPP, the payroll protection program, and then the SBA loans, basically the government's way to try to, put capital in with owners to prevent them from, completely bailing out.
Right.
So as long as, my clients, my business owners were particularly like feeling anxious about this, I just urged them, wait. The ones who waited, they did get relief, because before I talk about it, are you at all familiar with what these entail, like the PPP in particular?
Yeah, if you can give an overview,
Sure.
that'd be great.
So the PPP it was rolled out as a way to help the business owners keep their employees on payroll, even if they weren't working. So it was basically free money based on the number of employees you have and what you're paying them. It was implemented. It was free money to these owners as long as they proved that they used 80% of the money for salaries.
Okay.
That's a funny question. I was about to get into Andrew S.'s question. There's pretty funny. I'll talk about that later because you were talking about remote. Yeah. I'll talk about that later. So that was something that gave them an immediate cash, kind of like a shot in the arm. But it caused some problems because almost everybody who could no longer work or go into work, they left and started collecting unemployment.
Right.
Unemployment. Now, normally that's like unemployment doesn't pay you a whole lot, but the feds were subsidizing whatever state unemployment people were getting $600 per week. The
I
feds
know.
were doing this. I know, it was insane.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is predictable. We know what happened when things started to open up a little bit and people could go back to work. And then people realized that if they went back to their job, they would be making less money. What do you think happened after that?
Yeah, I mean they would be angry with their employer for calling them back, of saying, no,
Yeah.
I'm doing better off. Like, I'm going to take less
Yeah.
money for coming back to work.
So what then happened was these employers, they couldn't hire their old employees because they didn't want to come back and they were already living off the government's teat. So they had to try to hire new people and get them trained, you know, whether it's a salon or some type of other business that's in person. So, I mean, normally I talk crap about the government because that's my job to outsmart them. But
Right.
I don't want to give them too much crap about this because, I mean, they were kind of put in a position where it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You have to make sure people don't starve. But at the same time, you have to make sure the business owners will keep their businesses open. And so there was just a lot of that. People sitting on their couches making money. People trying to hire people who weren't willing to work, even new people, because they were making more in unemployment. And it just it's still kind of a mess, even right now.
So anyway, as you indicate, $600. If somebody was making $15 an hour without taxes times 40 hours a week, that's $600. So yeah, I mean, it was a significant, jump, and that was on top, right, of whatever
Yes.
your state was going to pay you for unemployment. So
so it was a minimum of $2,400 a month minimum, and a lot higher than that because you were collecting the state unemployment. I mean, it's not making you rich, but that's a decent amount of money to, not go back to work.
So clients are coming to you and maybe are they saying, how do I get my employees back? Or are they saying, what happens with my PPE, my government money? Because now I want to pay my employees, but my employees aren't coming back. Like, how should I document this? I mean, how do I keep my business going when I can't get these people back? Other people aren't available because, there's more competition for the people, I guess, who are willing to work. I don't know, but I'm assuming there's a big problem here of saying, we just don't have the employees anymore, Chad. I don't know if I can keep this going. It's not the fact that I'm not getting this, PPE access.
Mm-hmm.
The people, I can't bring them back. And if they do, they hate me.
Well, this is what the government did it this way. So yeah, that was really predictable. I mean, everybody could see that was going to happen. So originally the PPE was supposed to be, you have to prove that however much money you were granted for the PPP, you were spending 80% of it on salary, and you need to prove that by July 23rd or something. Okay. So predictably, the government, everybody was like, that's impossible. We can't even hire people to come back. And there were still restrictions in a lot of states, like, 25% capacity, bars and restaurants and things like that. So the government finally had to extend that. And so they're basically saying you have to prove by later in the year that you use 60% of it on payroll. So they're allowing more time for more people to get hired, and they're being a little bit more free about expenses that can be used for it.
Is that forgiveness too? So
yes.
Do they have to pay the money back? If they can prove this, then it's basically like a grant?
It's basically a grant. If you can prove that you used the money in the way it was supposed to be used, it's a grant and you don't have to pay it back. Now, it doesn't mean you get to write it off as a business expense on your 2020 taxes. That's been a whole kerfuffle, in my circles and some others. But yeah, that's the situation with it. And I'm just thinking, I don't know how you feel about if there's going to be another wave or something of this. Like, it would be absolutely devastating if that happens, before the end of the year, because then what can the government do at that point?
Yeah. I don't know. I've thought it, I've been thinking about that because, so I live north of Madison, Wisconsin, and the big news here is they've canceled the fall sports. So,
Big Ten. Yeah.
First time in 125 years, there won't be Badger football. But, so I'm like, okay, then the ripple effect, $100 million lost revenue from that. And I'm a UW alumni, so it doesn't take more than 10 hours to start getting the emails from the Alumni Association, the different universe, the calls coming in. Hey, would you make a donation to, like, no, no, forget it. I don't call. But yeah, so then you start looking, okay, that impact in Madison of everything that would come in, not only Madison, but yeah, other areas like Green Bay, Wisconsin. So Green Bay, Metro Green Bay is maybe like 200,000 people, but you shut that down because the Packers, at least the first 2 home games, won't happen.
Yeah.
What's it going to look like in these businesses and states, which, the states aren't bringing in the tax revenue that they were. And here again in Wisconsin, the Democratic National Convention was supposed to happen in Milwaukee. That shut down.
Yeah.
When do you? So I guess I'll bring this one back to you. Is when do you think the states and the Treasury departments of the states are going to come forward and say we have to cut 20%, right? Or big, significant cities are going to say we have to furlough or just flat out cut 20% of our staff? Because I'm looking at this saying, how has this not happened so far? Like, how is this not being announced at statewide levels of saying we have to do these like austerity measures?
There's been a lot of people, government, state employees here in the city of Chicago who've been furloughed. So it is happening. And to also answer your question, something that's really, really funny, I think, is it's this game. All of these big cities, or pretty much all of them, are of course run by Democrats. That's just the way it is.
Yes.
So they so desperately need federal help. They need the government, some money from the government because they've lost tax revenue too, to fund their services. So you got people who would just love to get help from the government, but they're too messed up to like ask Trump for it, because they see it as like, if they accept any help from the government, that means they're condoning anything that Trump does. So to me, that's been fascinating, because it's like, pick your poison on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it has to give somewhere, and I think that's, I don't know how that's going to play out. You're talking about so what happens if there is a second round of shutdowns and things like that?
Yeah.
So I was watching. I don't know how far you're located from. What is it that Best Buy in that stretch that was looted in Chicago?
Right. Earlier this week,
right.
Monday morning.
Right. So so obviously Madison, Wisconsin, State Street extensively hit by looting. The other areas. So I'm also, thinking a fair number of these areas aren't going to do really any rebuilding until after the election, because it's probably going to be, I would say election night's going to be very hostile no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And, from a business standpoint too, it's got to be like, God, am I going to keep the risk of keeping a brick and mortar business kind of anywhere right now? Because I mean, somebody breaks in. Yeah, I know there's insurance, but I've talked to a number of people who are business owners who had their places looted, and they're like, yeah, but now my insurance will go up tenfold because I'm in a high target area. My insurance carrier is saying, to maintain your insurance, you're gonna have to pay this. To try to get a small business loan, they're saying you're gonna have to pay this. Like a long-term prospect, they're like, maybe I'm going to keep this business, but I have to relocate out of here. I have to go to some area that has not been, targeted as a center for like protest and rioting. So as an economic thing. And then what do you do for parents? So, my wife and I have 2 daughters, are school age, and my, wife is a stay-at-home mom. So, I mean, that worked out, for us and things like that. But what do you do if you ask the country, all of these parents, and then what does that look like for K-12 public schools?
Yeah.
So it is so twisted to try to work through these scenarios. I don't know.
I've got a very quick, funny story about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, so of course, there's the pandemic and everybody's worried, and as we all know, then there was that George Floyd thing, which just piles of crap on the bad stuff that's already ongoing.
Right.
And the only thing I want to tell you, just specifically as a resident of Chicago, something that's been observed from my end, which is frankly, it's amusing, but it's also very sad. A few of my brick and mortar type business owners, and I won't say exactly what type of businesses they have, but when they saw that, half the city got rioted and broken into, and there's all that crap. I'm not talking about what happened here Monday. I'm talking about, throughout the month of June. Privately, they've told me that they have big signs that say Black Lives Matter. They're just doing every type of virtue signaling imaginable for those business. Do you think they're doing that because they believe that and they just want to show how much they care, or do you think they're doing it for another reason?
Yeah, obviously they're trying to lower their chance that the place is going to be
Yes.
be a target.
Yes. It's people think that, all these businesses are on their side. At least here in Chicago, I can't speak to some of these other cities, but a lot of people are doing it here simply so they won't burn down their store. They don't even support them.
And here's something else, Chad. So, for example, Madison State Street, I think like 77 businesses, looted. So windows smashed out, things like that.
Yeah.
So just a little story about State Street. It connects UW-Madison, the main building, and the Capitol. So it's the walk between those two, and it really has incredible shops, a major performing arts, center, hundreds of millions of dollars that was donated to the city. So it's this really special place, and it's severely damaged. But I was checking it out a couple days after the damage, right? Like during the day when people are coming out and they're still biking around and doing things, but so they had up the plywood, and murals are being painted on the plywood of all these different things, of positive, rebuilding stronger and stuff like that. And I'm like, first of all, okay, like this is so temporary, right? This is something in the moment to, give people the impression that all is going to be well. Everyone is going to come together over this. And that, even though this happened, these people was severely damaged. The trust in this area also severely fractured. I mean, some of these businesses, they had donated money, like one donated for a outdoor pool for the community, and their business was targeted, one of the first ones, and destroyed. But I'm looking at this, and then I'm mentioning it to the person with us, and I said, who's going to be the first person that's going to take down this plywood that just was painted with a mural? Like, it was not authorized by the owner. It was just people came around with spray paint. And I'm like, if you're the first one to take down the sign, like, you're going to be on the news. You're probably going to be addressed by people of, why are you taking this down? You're interfering with this message. And unless like the city overtly comes out and says, we have like a area we're going to put all of these and do like a periodic educational display and bring all of these out, that'd be the only safe way for businesses to do that. Because if you're the first business to do that, you are going to be a magnet for everything bad for attention. And then this whole thing too of like, the city, we're going to open up the streets. We're going to block the streets off, and people can have their businesses in the streets, especially.
They tried that here too.
and I'm like, okay, but last year on Halloween, when I took my youngest daughter trick-or-treating, it snowed and it was 20 degrees. I'm like, this is so short term. This isn't perpetual. This is just an immediate, as you said, very strong virtue signaling. To keep the things from getting too far out of hand. And it still like happened. What, it was 2 weeks later, then they the protesters turned to rioters and ripped down statues in front of our state capitol and beat up a legislator. And it was a physical therapist, a female physical therapist, and a high school or a school district social worker in her 20s and a physical therapist in her 30s, who were the ones on video that went up and assaulted this legislator and sent him to the hospital, and he had to have surgery. And this is not embellished. This is all captured on video. They were both, and then they turned themselves in like a month later after they kind of, people were starting to draw that. So it's not like they even came forward the next day and said, hey, like, we were caught up in this. It was, at least like then say, it was contagion effect. It got out of hand. It's basically we're hoping we don't get caught. We're still going to do business. We're still going to provide our services. But when it starts to circle in, so oh my God, I mean that kind of stuff like just was just frying my mind. But, oh man,
there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people just don't know regarding the way businesses are being run and how they're trying to protect themselves from getting, broken into and looted or something. It's been interesting.
So has anyone talked to you, also, I guess, about the physical location or having a physical presence, if that makes sense, or if they should be transitioning to virtual, or if they should, for example, are they like Chad? Is there a tax advantage if I hire security? And I know like Joe Doley was in the chat and Joe saying, even like a lot of security, it's not even available right now because they've been so tapped out. Or how do people look at trying to protect their assets if they're business owners in kind of the environment we have right now?
It's pretty hard for some of them because, I mean, at least here, we're still only at 25% capacity. Like if there's a patio, you can sit outside, but I mean, for bars and places you want to go indoors, they're limiting capacity. As far as how to protect their assets, I mean, most people are just trying to ride it out and stay afloat by doing things in a different way. Of course, restaurants take out and beers, having takeout alcohol you can buy and things like that. I know this is kind of a family stream you're doing, and I want to tell some stories about it, but I'm worried they're a little less, these are rated R stories.
I mean, tell them. Okay. And then we have a question also from Brian Bowden in the chat, and Brian had his time, working right on Wall Street too, and he's in the Bronx. So, he's got a question now. I know, like, you're not giving recommendations, but at least maybe some perspectives on things like precious metals and stuff like that. But
so he's asking, when I worked on Wall Street, I always advised anyone who asked to buy precious metals in physical form as well as certificates, and what's your recommendation? So that is totally outside of my professional wheelhouse. I'm not a financial advisor. But just, and I'm not an economist either, Mr. Clary's the economist, but right. I do think it makes sense to me when he and others say, it's good to have those things in physical form, because I mean, if you're invested in precious metals but you don't actually have them, how easy can that be taken away? So right. Yeah, my lack of professional experience with this, I would say it's good to have some hard assets.
Do you have people coming to you, clients asking you about this saying it doesn't make or what is it? Do I get taxed if I invest in certain, precious metals and things like that? What does it look like for a portfolio? Because I mean, these things don't pay dividends, but is it some, what does it look like? I guess that it's interesting because what are people saying from an accounting standpoint too? Of like, I guess what are safe havens when traditional safe havens like a 30-year federal note are paying like what 0.5%, and 5-year CD might be 1% or something. And then how do you kind of steer them into like, here's some people to look to, here's what to talk to, or but if people are like, I'm just afraid, like I have no safe haven for my money, or I have a neighbor who's convinced like there will be this big amortization, like just everybody that has above X number of dollars that'll be taken and put into a pot and redistributed. So they're like, how do we work against this?
I mean, I have a cop-out answer every time. One of my very good friends is a financial analyst here, and I send him clients, he sends me clients, and we've been friends for a while. Anytime somebody's asking me questions like that, and there's been a lot of them because they think I'm supposed to advise them on how to invest their money, I send them to my friend, because I mean, I could get in trouble, even if I preface it by saying, this is not intended to be advice. If I say anything and someone makes a decision by doing something I recommended, I could get in a lot of trouble. So I just send him to a real professional for that. I do get the questions a lot though.
Yeah. So you had a couple stories you wanted to share, and I want to hear them. So let's go for it.
Well, so I have a wide variety of different types of business clients, whether it's side business or a full-time business. And up until really last year, I only had, let's see, I had 3 strippers and 2 porn actresses. Like this was, I thought it was funny, and it was always amused me how we would figure out deductions for all of them, and they would offer to barter, wink, wink. But of course, I never did that.
Right.
Can't tax bartering. So what ended up happening, if you can't go into a strip club to strip because they aren't open, not many people are making porn because that's a non-essential activity according to state law here, although some might argue it's essential depending on who you are. So everybody has become a cam girl. You know what the cam girls are, what they do?
I've listened to you and Aaron. Yeah.
Oh, you've heard about that. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So basically it's the kind of strip club. It's either one-on-one clients are putting content on the internet, and then people can subscribe, and get that content. But yeah.
The part that's kind of disappointing to me and just makes me sad is that, when this first was floated and they were telling me they were going to do this, I was like, oh, they're not going to make nearly as much money as they were before. They're going to hate this. For whatever reason, I don't know if guys are lonely or they feel like they want to have some kind of one-on-one connection to somebody who's just trying to take their money. Like, they're just killing it. And I never root against my clients, but I just think it's really sad that they're making so much money doing this. Way more than the girls were doing it. They were making a lot stripping, but they're making even more with this.
Wow. I mean,
know.
that is so were some of them also cam girls prior to coronavirus, and then what's changed for them like right now? So if you're a cam girl last year in March versus being a cam girl right now
So some of them, the strippers were pretty much always strippers. They didn't do things over the internet that much. The porn stars, they had channels, I won't say the website, but it's one that people have all gone to. I've been told. I'd never do it myself, but I've heard, wink, wink. So I guess I think it has to be demand. Originally, I thought there was going to be so much supply that the money you can make from this would go down to zero.
Right.
Which really should have happened, and it's probably happening to many others. But because these girls had been, at least a couple of them had been in it in a while, they already had fans, and so they were just kind of fortified their presence, through Instagram and Twitter or whatever. And pretty soon, like, they were up, 1,000 followers over the course of a few weeks. And I have to check in with them because I need to know if we can make some quarterly payments and everything.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, I can say, like, it's true. They're killing it. They're making more than they normally would. And I don't think that's something to be celebrated right now.
But this, Chad, this is actually something I would write about in my book, like the velocity of information. This exact story would be terrific to indicate, how people's perception of, for example, the coronavirus and civil unrest and just the state of chaos is. Because let's say if you had winter storm that's hitting, the Midwest. So yeah, here, Madison, Chicago is going to be down for 4 or 5 days. Like, you might see a little spike in some of this, but that's going to be it. But when people believe, like, okay, for the long haul, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be shut down. And it's not only, let's say, strip clubs, but casinos and, whatever. There are these things. So yeah, the money flows somewhere in the time, and people then get into this, what's called crowd-in theory. And crowd-in theory definitely means, so when you start to see this and start to analyze it, it kind of reflects that people are thinking, oh, we're in for probably, another 6-12 months of a really wonky type of society. Like, so I guess, like, the point is, this isn't behavior you would see if a Hurricane Irma is going to hit or something like that. You wouldn't see this type of behavior, but
right,
because that happens and it recovers. But I think this really conveys this interesting crowd-in theory. There's, So you mentioned the supply and demand. Are you familiar with John Ronson?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. So John Ronson is an author, and he writes a lot of really cool stuff. So he's like, "Hey, thanks, Dave. That was a hell of a promo you just did there. Cool. I
Yeah.
read a lot of cool stuff." So
Hey,
so
sold
no.
me.
But yeah, so John Ronson is from England, so he narrates a lot of his own stuff. But he wrote a book called The Last Days of August, and it was about when Pornhub became popular. I don't know, what, like 7-8 years ago, and
Uh-huh.
he interviewed a adult film star who used the name August. And basically, once Pornhub came about, everything that was produced for content by producers was being hacked, and it was out on the web then for free, sometimes in like less than a day.
Mhm.
And of course, like, the content producers could go to whoever it was in the interview, like the head guy at Pornhub who had become a billionaire over. And so they would say, you have to take this down because somebody uploaded this to your site and it's content which I have a copyright on or whatever. And he'd say, okay, and then, they'd have this process. But then at that moment, there'd be 10 other people uploading it. And so these content producers would say, you really had, unless you're dealing like with one client, this whole industry had pretty much been destroyed. And so anyway, like with the Last Days of August, I was talking about strippers, porn stars, for example, who lost their careers. Like, they lost everything. They would go and there would be no work, or it would be so minimal because the content producers are saying, listen, there's money to be made on this for 24 hours, and then after that there's nothing. It's not like it was 15 years ago before all of this.
Mhm.
So they actually interviewed the guy who was the head of who created Pornhub, but whatever. And this guy was just saying, ethically, yeah, he understands, like, this destroyed a lot of people, but he's a businessman, and he's not uploading the content. People are choosing to upload the content into this format. And but yeah, that's kind of interesting, because if it would seem there'd be some saturation point in this. And what you're saying is, like, your clients are saying, yeah, absolutely. So give me some idea of just some figures, like maybe were people making 5 times as much as they were making, or throw some numbers out there. Say, here's a person, they're 26 years old and they made $300,000, just to give people an idea of the numbers we're talking about here.
Well, I'll start with the strippers and I have to preface this. Obviously, strippers make a ton of their income via cash. So by default, I never really know what they're actually making. I know what we put on paper because we have to put something. And of course, the clubs want to at least write some of their income off. So some of it ends up on a W-2. The strippers, at least the ones I've seen, are so far making twice the amount of money they used to, make on paper. So let's see, we started this whole thing in March. 5, 10, 15, 20. I'd say that they're averaging about 5,000 a month, which may not sound like a lot, but just to sit around in your underwear and pretend to be nice to people, I mean, to me, that's a lot.
Wow. And what were they averaging before that?
What were they, the strippers? Like, what were they making? Or
yeah.
So they were making, on paper, mind you, they were making half that much. But I mean, the thing is, that's
right.
Obviously we know they were making way more than that, but I couldn't get them to like prove to me what they were making. I'd be like, look, it's your name that goes on this waiver here that says I can only go by the information that you're giving me. So I suspect they were making a lot more than was being reported.
Wow. So how about cam girls? Like, how about cam girls right now? Maybe some of them maybe some are calling you and saying, hey, do I have to pay like quarterlies now because like my income has significantly changed here, Chad? So I want to make sure I'm on the right side of my accounting.
So the funny thing about them, the girls that had been doing this, a lot of them weren't necessarily getting issued what's called Form 1099s. Those are what you get when you're an independent contractor, but you have somebody who's contracting you out, like maybe one of the websites or whatever. So the 1099 amounts they were getting weren't terribly high. These are the porn stars. So they'd had the platforms for a while, but they weren't really making a lot of money as cam girls. They were getting paid for the porn that they make. So this is what they ended up doing, kind of cleverly, I think. They started linking their cam girl pages they started taking those and putting them on the sites like Pornhub and all that, and it really got their names out there. So they're in for a shock about how much in taxes they're going to have to pay, because all of this is going to be reflected in a 1099. Pornhub does issue 1099s.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes. And so I've been warning them. I'm like, look, you really ought to make an estimated tax payment. It's due in a month, Q3, September 15th. Let's just talk about that. Oh, I don't need to do that. Let's just worry about that come tax time. And I'm trying really hard to get them to understand that they're going to get, here's another thing. They don't save their money. None of these girls know how to save their money. None of these girls are particularly responsible when it comes to finances. So I'm already ready for them to be in for a rude awakening in about 6 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So do you have one or two cases where you can, people you can point to and say, right now they are making, since the start of coronavirus, right, since March, they are up 5-fold in what they're doing, or they were making $5,000 a month, and now they're reporting to me they're making $10,000 a month. Anything objective like that? So
I got to go back to my therapists.
Okay.
I went through this kind of in mid-July, because that's when Q2 quarterlies were due, and of course that was the new due date, the extended filing date. I remember back in January and February, I had brought in a number of new therapists. They were starting their business, they were ready to go. So they were the ones that were particularly scared. They're like, oh my God, what do I do? I just rented an office, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been doing this for a number of years. And the new therapists that I've brought on this year, they're easily making double what they would have made if they had started in 2019. They would have made half as much as they have now made because of the pandemic. They owe what they're making to the pandemic because of the telehealth, and because people just have a lot of problems now as a result of this, mental problems. So if therapy was a stock, I would have loaded up on it a long time ago after this thing.
That is, that is unbelievable. So this is an advantage where, if you're a therapist, if you're newer into the industry, this could really be a good thing for you versus, if you're somebody who developed a clinic and now you've got, first, my former neighbor was a psychiatrist, and he owned several clinics in the area, and then had different levels of therapists, working cognitive behavioral, marriage therapist, sports therapist, all of these things underneath. But he had all of these physical locations. And then, so I'm thinking right now, and he retired, he's been gone, 10 years, but had this hit, he would have had to evolve and move to that, but he kind of, he would have had a hard time because he also has these physical locations, which he still has to have the grass cut. He has to heat them in winter. They're in Wisconsin. You have to do something with these, even if people are working remotely. These become liabilities, I would say. But oh my God. So that is absolutely, and then the fact too that a lot of your clients who are, how about your therapist? Are they saving their money, or is it more of a generational thing where you're just saying no one's saving money right now? People are just spending it all.
So I'd say about 4 out of 5 of my therapists are millennials, to give you some context. I have some Gen Xers that are older there. For the most part, and I'm going to give myself credit for this. I don't know if they're actually listening to me. They have been fairly responsible, the ones that I've had. Now there's the outliers. That I got one who's addicted to cocaine because they can't handle the stress of the job. That's been ongoing. a number of them do have substance abuse issues, because it's probably hard to be a therapist and listen to people's like problems all day. I'm not saying I would want that job.
Right.
But yeah, aside from a few outliers, at least from what I can tell, I'll get the real story in about 7 months or so. But from what I can tell, they're doing well, because except for online shopping, like I don't know where you can really spend money right now. You can spend it on cam girls. You could get it on, takeout. There's just not a lot of people going out,
Yeah.
even with things opening here.
Yeah. That's, I live about 20 minutes from Wisconsin Dells. So anybody can just, Google that if you're not familiar, but it is what's called the water park capital of the world. So every summer, it's tens of thousands of people go to these huge water parks, and it also has these huge convention centers, some of the biggest in the United States. And those have largely been shut down. And then they tried to open one up, and it lasted like 2 weeks. And part of it was they couldn't get the visas for the foreign workers to come in, which are a lot of kids, staffing these things. So like that was also, so that's an area too of like entertainment that is just gone, for the state. Wow. So how about this psychology of purchasing? What are people, are you looking at people like, what I'm trying to get at here is, okay, so at the start of coronavirus, law of scarcity, right? People are just going to buy toilet paper, canned goods, stuff like that. And then maybe as a business, they're going to dump their marketing, right? Like our friend Nick Schulander was sharing this with me. Nick works with marketing with companies and small companies. And he said, that's kind of their gut reaction is, oh my God, I'm outlying, whatever, $800 a month on marketing. I got to cut that. I'm just trying to save everything. So what are some things maybe you saw at the start, like some of these fiscal decisions that are different now than from the start? Are people making more investment into that, or are they like buying more personal things? Are they buying personal property? Are they, I guess what I'm trying to see is like, is there this crowd in behavior, of like people saying, you know what, I'm going to go out and buy a new BMW because why not? If it's the money's in the car versus like if the government tries to take it out of a bank account, they can't because I've got a car, or it's something that makes me feel good. Crowd in theory is also this whole thing of like, you know what, I am going to do this because it makes me feel good. I'm going to buy this new TV. I'm going to invest in this new wardrobe and all of these things, which and so that I've started to see. And if we look at places just like stores, like big retail, interior paint is selling out or has sold out. So that's a sign of like comfort. And puzzles selling out. But maybe anything you've seen where you're looking and seeing some people make some purchases, which are really probably solely leisure, but not scarcity or comfort.
So I have less of an ability to see those types of things, just because I mainly deal with business expenses, and I'll occasionally, talk about people's personal spending habits. Anything involved with like creating more and more entertainment at home, I know for a fact that people are heavily investing in that, whether it's double the size of their TV, maybe double the speed of their internet. At least in my circle, I get the impression, because these people would normally be spending a lot of money traveling, to Europe, to South America, to East Asia. I just know a lot of people who that was their passion. Well, they can't really do that. So they're trying to make it as best they can to be entertained at home. So those are some of the items I'm seeing. But yeah, like you said, I don't really go to Home Depot, but I bet all kinds of like home improvement projects are being done. Things that people are just trying to do without risking going out. That's another thing.
Yeah, that's it's pretty interesting, to dig down and to see some of these things. And I had Morgan Rogue on, who has Rogue Preparedness channel, and she was on the previous show, and she was talking about things that she was starting to see that were disappearing. Like you couldn't get a sewing machine like anywhere. Use a sewing machine, or on the Craigslist, you couldn't get a sewing machine. And, same thing with like a freezer and stuff like this. But those things are kind of just more like crowd in. Something's going to go on, down the line longer. And then Phil Heinrich, who's, in Germany saying like video game stuff is just
Oh
crazy.
yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because people are like, yeah, what else are you going to do? So they're just like, that's it. But see, that's also like this whole, crowd in thing. Like you'd spend money on video games now, but like back on March 15th, when the NCAA is closing in Disney and the president's coming on and these, we're going to speech today at 3:00 and everyone's like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
No one's buying video games at that point. They're like running to the store and throwing everything in their cart.
Yeah.
And just, anything that's food, anything that's toilet paper, batteries, whatever they can get, because they're thinking it's the end of the world. Like there's going to be some announcement of, we've discovered that whatever this is going to infect everybody within 90 days. And there's this high fidelity rate and whatever. But so how about you as I guess as it's, what does this mean for a CPA? And does it mean like you are doing more virtual? Has your business changed from? Okay, tell me about that.
So Aaron Clary always gives me crap about this. I often say I would like to be completely location independent. So he'd be like, are you location independent yet? And this obviously it hasn't happened yet, before this year. I have my own office, I until this year, I would spend most of my time there in tax season. There was a period from, I'm going to say, late March all the way till late May. Nobody would come see me in person, not at all. I worked strictly from home, and I would offer people, I'm like, look, I'll wear a mask. There's hand sanitizer. There's space to be 6 feet apart. Nobody wanted to meet that way. So this thing, I think it may have the unintended consequence of creating location independence for my type of business. Because traditionally, like the only sort of hangers-on that still want to come in, and I have been keeping careful track of this, it's older clients, Gen X or even boomers,
right,
who aren't as into technology. So it has me thinking, and everyone's like, it's never going to be the same because people are going to work from home. Commuting will be less. The commercial real estate will struggle. I think that because I'm not really providing therapy, all I'm really doing is, doing your tax returns, providing you some planning advice, and I can do that over Zoom. I'm actually kind of excited to see what's going to happen because I would love to give up my office to not need that expense every month.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that is so. With that being said, what do you think might happen to, like Silicon Valley, places like this where, so my brother-in-law is an engineer with Google and has been with Google for about 15 years. And of course lives proximal to Google headquarters.
Yeah.
But they've been told for the next, I think through summer of 2021 to work remotely. And he was one of the first to be told to work remotely. So I don't think he's been at Google headquarters at the campus since, early March and everything. And I would say, of course, the high cost of living, everything out there. So at some point these places, it's got to be like, do I stay here or do I move to like Boise, Idaho?
Right.
And what is the appeal going to be to live in some of these places unless you actually have to do physical work in those locations? I'm a firefighter here. I am doing these types of things which can't be outsourced. But what do you see for where things are probably going to be or could go potentially, like even like Chicago, like
well, but before I answer that, I just got to say this. Before all of this year happened, I used to be really jealous of people who they would do their work, in an office, in a restaurant, or, a mechanic or whatever. And then they got to go home and not think about it. I used to really get under my nerves that, at least for my work, I felt like I kind of had to be reachable during non-business hours.
Right.
And this whole thing completely gave me a paradigm shift because, as you can imagine, if you're able to do most of your work remotely, that means you're probably not ever going to lose your job or your business isn't going to suffer. So now I'm kind of like, instead of being jealous of the dentist that'll go home and not have to do any work until the next day, I'm actually kind of grateful that this is how it is for me.
Oh God,
Um,
that is a great point.
yeah, for years I used to complain about it. As for Chicago, do you know how bad the budget situation is here? Do you know the
No, it's
financial
not good.
crisis?
I know it's not. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. So you couple that, like we already had a real crisis with underfunded pension liabilities. So that's in a normal year with normal tax revenue, yada, yada, yada. Man, I do not know how this city is not going to have to become the next Detroit because there's no tax money in this. These underfunded pension liabilities are not going to go away. So a lot of us, especially in my field, we're just kind of sitting back, just waiting to see what they're gonna do to make our lives worse to collect all that tax revenue.
Oh,
It's
God.
about to get really bad here and probably some other cities. So I don't have any timeline on if and when I would move out, but if my job becomes like 90%,
Right.
virtual, I'd seriously consider leaving. I don't know where I would go, but the way things are going to go here, I would probably bounce.
Because likely what they would do is they would just do like I mean, taxes would go through the roof. I
Oh yeah,
mean, they would just do that. So that would be so if let's say that you were able to be location independent and to the point where if you needed a location periodically, you could rent it from somebody on an
yeah.
hourly basis. Um, and and actually that's probably a hell of an industry, right? Of someone coming up with yeah, almost this boutique industry of saying, I'm going to maintain yeah, 5 meeting rooms of, not very big, maybe 200 square foot, and then basically rent them out to, could be you, like a CPA, or where people have to have some face-to-face business, and then after that, sanitize it, or there maybe is that maybe like a weird timeshare type thing. It just couldn't be too big. Like it would have to be, like
I actually have a great story about that. This is a place
yeah,
it's about, I'd say 3 blocks from where I live. This place, it was a VR bar, a virtual reality bar, and that opened probably about a year and a half ago. So that was one of the ones that like, oh, they're going to be shut down. People aren't even allowed to go indoors to, get drunk and put on VR glasses or whatever. So they did what I thought was extremely clever. They took out all the VR stations or whatever. What they did was they put in, temporary virtual offices. So they've
yeah,
completely pivoted away from this and they're actually doing really well. I was talking to the owner a few weeks ago. They're getting all kinds of people who just can't stand being at home and they just want to go somewhere, and you can't really go into restaurants, but if you make yourself, for temporary in-person office and leave enough space, they've recouped a lot of money pivoting to that. So you're right. I think there's going to be more and more like brick and mortars who are going to try to find a way to cater to that, however they can, meeting space or whatever.
So what you're talking about right now, so it's virtual reality bars. So then people are going there to like get out of their apartment or get out of their house, and
Yeah,
then do their work from there. So it's just a change of pace. So so I think there's an interesting part of that too from a psychology standpoint. There's something called Parkinson's theory, which I have to give credit to Phil Heinrich for making me aware of this. Parkinson's theory basically meant that you would fill up the amount of time. So let's say you had 10 hours to paint a fence. Like you would make sure that it took 10 hours to paint this fence, even if it was like really a 2-hour project. But there's another side of Parkinson's theory, which was saying that people, so like you get up in the morning and you go to your office. So you have a routine. You leave your place, you get to the office, open the door, set up your stuff. So that is actually a start. That's a bookend of your day. You are opening the door to your office. And then when you close the door to your office, you go home. That's another bookend. So work happens in between. Now, of course, I know like work happens outside of that, but like largely like this is the work time. But right now, with people working remotely, there are people who this Parkinson's theory isn't working because for them, like they're always working, right? They don't shut it off. They go upstairs, but here's their office. So it isn't as clear as like the commute ends my day, the commute starts my day. So what
I've
you're
struggled
describing,
with that. I've struggled with it for a while. Yeah.
I'm glad you shared that, because I think
Yeah.
what you're getting at is this could also be like this Parkinson's theory, where people do that to reestablish some exact start and end, which is a tangible physical activity that
Yeah.
they're doing. So you said you struggle with that. Tell me, because this is something I've been hearing too, is that people who have gone to remote work are feeling that subjectively and probably objectively too, they're putting in more hours than they did when they were actually at the job, even though
Yeah.
it's maybe the same amount of work, or else they're expanding and doing more work. So yeah, tell me how you're experiencing that.
So early in my career, I've been at this for 6.5 years now, like my own thing. And when I was just getting started, and I did it part time, but then when I wanted to ramp it up to full time, I would take any client. Man, it didn't matter who they were or what they wanted. I would just take. And the way I thought I would differentiate myself was I would just respond no matter what. If I get an email, I'll respond, even if it says, I can't answer your question now, but I want you to know I read it. And as you can predict, what do you think happened to my well-being and my personal life living that kind of work life since I started?
Yeah, it just burned out, right? And
I just burned out. It
overwhelms you, and you
Yeah.
get tired, and I got to remind me to come back. I got a story kind of on that I can add into that. But yeah.
And so I guess I was so unsure that I could really make this work, that I had this flawed belief that I had to always be reachable, and even on my off season, you always got to check your email. And I just got burned out, and so I started like cutting. I didn't check my mail. Here's a good example. I was in Oregon. I got back from Oregon a week ago. I was there for 2 weeks. Like, tax season had ended. I wanted to see my family and everything. So the challenge was I had to find a way to not check my email the entire time, which
Okay.
was really, really hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Really hard. So, I didn't do it. I tried not to think about it. I had a great time. I had a 5-hour flight on the way back to Chicago. So I went ahead and paid for the airport Wi-Fi. And what do you think I did that entire time on the flight back? And I needed every bit of it. I was responding to emails.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was a school administrator for, I don't know, a dozen years. And once it got to be Sunday night, right? And of course, like that was also a job where there's so many night meetings, some stupid meetings, like where this committee is going to meet, and then this committee, and then the grading. Like, Jesus Christ, like we don't need all of this stuff. Like, not every night has to be a meeting, but which is one of the reasons I am so so glad to be out of just the structure of that. But Sunday nights, like I would try to preserve the weekend the best I could, but Sunday nights, eventually 8, 9 o'clock, once the kids were in bed, go down, open up the email, and of course, it'd be like 1,000 emails,
Yeah.
because everybody blind carbons you on everything that they're sending across the, throughout districts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I start responding, and then I had other school administrator friends. Like we had a pretty close network, right? We're all like burning out at the same time. And then I said, how do you guys handle the Sunday night thing? And I'll never forget, one of my really good friends said, like, I don't even sleep Sunday nights anymore. I just I'll respond and do emails. I'll like work ahead. And usually like Mondays were always these like big administrative meetings. Those are always horrible and negative, but he was in a different district, right? But he's like, and then I just leave like at 4 a.m. I get to my office to get the voicemails off, like, the 50 voicemails, and most of them are all negative. And, but he's like, yeah, I haven't slept on Sunday nights for years. And then I had a vacation, as you kind of said, my kids were younger. We're up north, and you're expected to have your phone on 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
It was actually in my contract, right? That you had to be reachable, and they would provide you a satellite phone. It was nuts. Like, looking back, it's stupid. I would tell people, like, run from this stuff. It's absolutely insane. And there was something that went down, and it wasn't like a major thing, but it was something that I got pulled out. I was with my family and we were at a restaurant. I had to go take this call, and then basically I told my wife, take the kids for the rest of the day, and I got to deal with this, and responding at night from the hotel. And I'm like, so this is freaking not worth it. But yeah, as you're indicating, I think anybody listening to this, if you know, if you are in a position where you have to be on this 24-hour accessible thing, or you put yourself into that thinking you're going to advantage yourself, it's just a fast way to burn out. And I got, when I got later in my career and I got to the point of retiring early, I remember talking with a few clients that I worked with, and I was telling them, I'm going to cut back hours and things like that. And it was really weird because I had a response from one of my long-term clients on the West Coast. And the next day, and they said, we want to pay you more money. And whatever we can do to make this work. And I said, well, I said, this isn't about you. I'm not upset with you. It's just a change that I have to make. And I also felt, I was thinking about it that night, and I'm like, people get so dependent upon you also. It's kind of like what you were saying, like people don't want to make a move until they run it by you of how this. And it's almost like this whole, like, what, social media mentality of like, I'm not sure I'm going to wear this tonight, so I'm going to post it to Facebook. And if it gets enough thumbs up, this is what I'll wear when I'm on the show tonight. And it was really weird because I came back, and I knew the CEO really well. And we just had a talk, like not, just non-recorded, like a Zoom call or whatever. And I'm just like, what's the deal? And he's like, we're used to working with you, right? We don't want to, it's a good relationship. And so I said, well, it has to be fair. Like, I'm not going to charge you way above like market or something like that. But if I'm not here, like, it's not also good for you to just be solely dependent upon me, because at some point I'm going to exit out of this and do other things. But it was really weird. It was the psychology of how, as a business, they got so, as you said, kind of people who were like, Chad, I can only meet with you in your office. I have to bring in the papers. I have to show you this statement that I got here. I can't take a picture or scan it to you. I actually have to show it to you. That is a mentality that some people are still kind of locked in and moving beyond that. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't want to reveal too much here, but I have made the decision, and this is not just because of Corona and everything. I've been thinking about this for a while. 2021, there's going to be some significant changes as far as my business goes, because it's like you said, some people can't, like, it would take them 2 seconds to Google something and then they have their answer. Instead, they're contacting me, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I just say I'm devising a plan to reduce the amount of hours I'm getting, reduce the amount of emails, because that's the part I dislike about my business the most, is that everybody's got so many questions. There's no such, everybody starts their email with these words. Okay. Hey, Chad, I hope you're well.
Right.
Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Quick question. There is no such thing as a quick question, at least when it comes to tax, because the second you provide an answer, there's always like 3 or 4 other follow-up questions that follow my answer. Even when I try to snuff those out, I'm like, well, the answer is no, because, and I'll say it always leads to more and more questions. So
right.
There's going to be change. I've decided after this year, there's going to be some serious changes the way I do things.
Good, man.
Yeah.
I had a question for my tax accountant, because, I mean, now the things that I do have many layers, but before, unless it's like something super easy, right? That I do have down to, like, it's a yes or no or whatever, or what's the threshold on this versus like my personal information, which you have. I always tell them, charge me, because to me, it's a professional, I wouldn't say courtesy, but if someone was asking that of my time on whatever, I mean, I don't know, but it's something where I said, here are questions I have 3 questions. And, I expect you to bill me to answer these, because I know you've got your things. And, I don't know. So that's really also, I think, maintained a really good relationship there. But I'm assuming there, as you said, there's so many people who are like, yeah, by the way, here are questions, and just expect you to answer them. And you're like, this is like 30 or 40 minutes, or like, all I'm going to do is give you links to a site that you could have easily found to, download XYZ and obtain this yourself, or maybe just crystal balling. Like, I have no idea. Chad, what happens in the next year if I make 60,000 or 80,000 or 100 or 20,000, or we have this or this level of inheritance, and they give you like all of these scenarios, and you're like, well, holy smokes, man.
This is, I still can't get over how consistent this is. What's so funny is that when someone has a question, whether it be quick or otherwise, I'd say about 10% of the people that are emailing me or whatever are cool with that. They're like, hey, I totally understand if you need to bill me for this, I expect that. And what's so funny is that it's almost always the case that whenever somebody says that, they're genuinely quick questions, which, didn't really take any time. And that's fine. It's really the rest of them that try to take advantage of me so much, try to get me to give them free advice. They never once consider that, they should pay for my time. So it's like the ones that I don't want to charge are the ones that say, charge me if you need to. So it's that 90% that I'm developing. I mean, there's things like A clients, B clients, C clients, whatever. But yeah, the days of me just like answering everybody's quick questions, they're over. I'm not doing this anymore.
Joshua Landrum, and I appreciate Joshua's been a regular in the chat. It's funny because he's the question, Chad, can I itemize this year? Right? There's so much that goes into that. As someone who had a business, and we did itemize of everything that goes into that, and now having to hit the new thresholds. That literally is.
Well, what's funny is that I've started doing what you've suggested. Like I pre-write out emails for specific questions, and most of them just have links. I say like, here, this link will explain everything. And then if they ask a follow-up question, I just don't write back. So there's people, I'm sure you've heard this expression where you want somebody, whether it's a client, somebody running for office, you really want them to go away, but you don't want them to go away angry, because you don't want your name getting dragged through the mud on social media or whatever, on Yelp. I've reached a stage where for me, it's not about what clients am I going to take on, because I already have my niches, my markets. Right now, it's a question of how am I able to get rid of certain clients and do it, properly, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah. I went through, something similar. And then what I did, per the advice of a friend that had gone through this process, is they said, if you have someone that you can refer them to, like if you do believe they're a good client, right? That they have their stuff together. They're not coming to you at the last minute with their taxes and nothing is prepared. But it's just like, I have to downsize. So I did that, and I did have people I contacted and said, I'm going to refer some people to you. So if you do get like a message from them and they mention me, yes, I did refer them. I don't have capacity to work with them anymore, but I do think, they're a client that is worthy of considering adding if you have capacity. And that really helped me on a professional level. That wasn't my approach, at all coming into it. And then, again, that was just shared with me of saying, Dave, let's rethink this. Like, make this exit and then make the second step. So you're just not leaving it. So they feel that they're out in the cold, that you're saying, by the way, here's like, somebody else, make this contact. They're already aware that they are going to be getting contacts of some people who had worked with me and stuff. So for me, that is
something I've been doing in the last couple of years. And let me tell you how this usually goes. Like it's good advice and it often works, but I've found this, particularly this year, this tax season. I had met somebody who wanted to start up their own CPA practice, kind of like I did. So I agreed to, give him 100 clients that I didn't want. I get a little kickback for whoever ends up sticking around. But the problem is that and I felt like a genius at the time. I'm like, I'll just always do this and I'll keep who I want to keep. The problem is that guy, and really other people I've tried to do this with, they're looking to maximize what they charge because they know they have to kick back some to me. So when that happens, they raise their fees too high. And then the client that I referred them to, they'll come back to me and say, hey, do you have any other referrals, or can you please just do them? You know, so-and-so was too pricey. And so I kept having people come back and be like, well, they were more expensive than you, so we just want to go with you. And so at that point, I just sent them to the H&R Block, you know, the neighborhood, because for whatever reason, it just really pissed me off when people would do that, when they would just come right back to me and be like, well, we didn't want to use them, so we'll just stick with you. And I'm like, that's not an option. So, yeah.
And so many people just aren't professional these days.
No.
I mean, I'm sure like the clients that you work with and, you know, I do a lot of, well, you know, school safety stuff like across the nation, and it floors me, the lack of, I wouldn't even know if it's professionalism, because I think you have to have this metacognition to be aware that I just think people completely unaware and completely clueless. Like I was asked to come in and do some pretty significant consulting in a location, and you know, so it was a big commitment from this place to bring me in. And as I'm sitting there and they assemble their people at one point, you know, and I'm going over some things, like they're totally just like, you know, whatever you put in place is fine. And then kind of like, we're not going to do any of this anyway. Like, it's not you. It's just like, it doesn't matter. This isn't personal. It's not you. And like one of the people told me that who was in the ranks said, no, this is the same way with X, with Z, you know, with Y initiatives where now, you know, they bring in things. So just know if people get up and are taking phone calls and leaving the room. Oh, and Chad, get this. This is another thing. This actually, I mean, it's floored me. This is like back late 2019. They met with me ahead of time, one of the HR folks, and they said, yeah, we're not sure like if you encounter this in other places, but if people feel anxiety when you're talking about this stuff, they do have the right to leave the room, and they don't have to return to the presentation. And I'm like, well, it's nothing, you know, graphic, nothing that I'm presenting that is terrifying, you know, it's school safety presentation and something specific to the district. But it basically was anybody that felt, yeah, this level of, and I mean, so that's subjective. And really the HR person is kind of like nodding their head as they're telling me this, of like, this happens all the time now. Like people just get up when they don't want to, they're done hearing stuff, they just leave. And it happened. Like it was, I had mentioned something, and they also twisted it into something that it completely wasn't. And I can't, if I actually would have recorded the presentation, I could have nuanced and picked this out. It was something really weird. I don't know, maybe it was like on door locks or some codes or something like that. And it was, well, you know, building codes, those were all put in to limit. So, you know, only certain types of buildings could be in certain areas. And this is really about the segregation of a city. And I'm like, holy smokes, like, I'm just talking about building codes for fire codes on a door. I'm not talking about now a narrative that you've just reintroduced to me of why this city is completely designed the way that it is, from an ethnic standpoint. I'm like, I don't know your city. I'm telling you about door codes and barriers as one slide. So so that part was frustrating. When I left there, I said, I'm not going to do this type of thing again, because people, you know, up front, it's just not worth the time. I mean, if you can do the excuse yourself from, I don't know if it's critical thinking, if it's from, you know, knowledge. I don't know. I mean, do you see any of that, or do you,
let's see, not typically so much that. I get a lot of people who, I mean, I say this kind of humorously, but you know that movie, what was it, A Few Good Men, where the dude's like, you can't handle the truth, you know, that part. I have to play that role sometimes because people are just sticking their head in the sand and they won't accept bad news. So then they don't deal with the things they need to deal with. And then we have a real mess on our hands the next year. And that's pretty much when I kick him out, because I can only help people who want to help themselves. And that's going to become an issue probably in the next 2 months, that's going to be a real thing, because that's when you can't file past October 15th. You just
Okay.
can't. Yeah. So I don't know if that's similar to what you were talking about, but I do have a lot of triggered type people that, what can I do?
Yeah. So I guess in getting toward closing, and then I want to hit on some incredible points that you brought up, because actually these are things that I want to bring forward into the velocity of information. But do you have any clients who have just are kind of just, again, giving up on? You hit this kind of at the start too, but tell me maybe about a client who's giving up on a prospect of a business that you're looking at it and saying, from a bigger perspective here, I don't think you're looking at it. You're letting your emotions guide you.
Yeah.
And what's maybe like the most recent that's happened? Is it something like in the last week, or is it something?
This happened a few weeks ago before I left town, and this one actually really bums me out. He's such a nice dude. Like, he's one of the best clients you could ask for. He had his own tattoo business, but he did it really smart, because he niched himself in that he only worked on tattoos that were related to like having cancer. So whether it was like covering up scars, he was very talented at putting ink on things for people who really felt self-conscious about it. The guy was killing it. I mean, he came to me in 2017. For the last couple of years, like, he was just destroying it. I mean, he was really doing a good job. And unfortunately, this COVID thing really spooked him out, because of course, tattoo parlors closed, in March. I believe they've opened up, some of my other tattoo clients, they are operating. But I mean, this dude, he was telling me he's so spooked that he just wanted to shut everything down and look for a salaried job somewhere. And I thought that was particularly sad, because he doesn't have to do that. I mean, they will let people come in for tattoos. Like, it's not reached a point where those shops will never be open again. But he just got spooked, and I couldn't talk him out of it. I was like, look, so-and-so, look at what you've made the past 3 years. You can't tell me that, you won't come to at least, 60% of that, even with restrictions. And he just couldn't deal with it. Couldn't handle it. He had problems handling it.
So was he like thinking, people are going to come in here and I might get infected, or like there's going to be possibly more city or whatever regulations, or?
It was really the combination of the two. Like, he, of course, was concerned about you have to be close to somebody to, give him a tattoo. But he was also concerned that, and he's a really smart guy, he's just concerned that we don't know how long this pandemic is going to go on. And, tattoo parlors are about as unessential as it gets, except in, hipster type neighborhoods. But I mean, they're not people, that's low on the list of what businesses are going to be open. So I can understand why he felt anxious. I just think he really jumped the gun by doing that. Like, he's shut down. That's it. He's out.
Holy smokes.
I know.
Yeah, that's really that's a sad story, because then you're also losing, the talent. I mean, you're not losing an employee who was, for example, in some job they train you and it's interchangeable. I mean, you're losing someone who has a real talent and a skill with that. And man.
Well, I asked him to reconsider. I said, if you want to shut down the business, at least look for, jobs at tattoo shops before you do that. But I mean, nobody's hiring because of the uncertainty here. So right now he's about 40 years old and doesn't know what he wants to do with the rest of his life. It's rough.
That is a messed up place to be. So, I mean, when I was, and this, so I retired at age 47, which was, there were a lot of factors with that. And one of the factors was, I spent time learning about money and also working when I was very young. We had a concrete factory 2 blocks away. I was able to get in, I don't know, like at 4, work permits back then. I don't know, what was it, 13, 14 years old. And they'd give you an above the table check, and then you'd get some kind of personal check or cash under the table.
Yeah.
Hey, can you make it 38 hours this week? I'm like, hell yeah, I can make it happen. And CDs back then were paying 10%, and Ford Motor Company used to issue a CD. Basically, it's like a CD. It was a forward certificate. So if you send them $1,000, they'd give you a 10-year certificate that would pay 10% every year. So it was, and I was, I know Clary's got his minimalism series that just released, and I wouldn't say minimalist, but I didn't make any catastrophic financial mistakes. I guess if you listen to Warren Buffett of saying, if you can avoid, a couple huge financial mistakes in your life, like I didn't rack up $100,000 in student loans in, anthropology or something like that. So I did manage to sidestep a lot of these things. Then I think, coupled with work but yeah, so it's exception though, right? Like it is just it's just a marvel, because people, I don't know. I mean, saving isn't there, planning ahead isn't there. There was a point when I would, for maybe 10 years, like through maybe in my 30s, like at the end of every day, I would tally up kind of like the money that we had versus like retirement versus like this is for spending. I had like just multiple spreadsheets, and it would take, 30 minutes, but I always knew, and then always like set aside, little accounts. And I'll tell you, side gigs, and tell me, like, what percentage of your, but what are some side gigs that your clients have that also seem to be like really good income makers?
Well, let's see. I mean, the typical online businesses, people are trying to sell stuff on eBay or whatever. You buy it for X amount, sell it for a higher amount. I have some kids that are trying to do that. I don't know how well they're doing, but they seem to be moving a lot of inventory. Really, side businesses. There's one accountant, I got to give him credit. He's a CPA, a colleague I've known for a while. He started his own YouTube channel of all things and ended up getting, God, he's up to like 300,000 in subscribers. I swear it seemed like it happened overnight. I mean, he just somehow captivated everyone. So he's barely even focusing on being a CPA and enjoying being a YouTube star. Oh, let's see some others. There's not a lot you can really do to sell things in person on the side. So, I mean, people are just trying to sell their services over the internet, whether it's contract writing. One of my friends who has a day job as a programmer, like he's making like 5 times the amount of money on his side business doing coding, to outside people. So that's really been something. Yeah. But yeah, it's mainly people who are just, they found the ways to get the internet to work for them, because, selling stuff in a brick and mortar, that's not good for a while.
Yeah, the art of the side hustle, I think, is just so fascinating. And for me, that was one of the things. I started to teach university classes, right? Like they would need an adjunct for a few things, and then and I took a few opportunities, and then also, again, early on, like someone pulled me aside and said, listen, whatever they offer to you, like take it, like, because you can figure it out. Never say no, because the more you say yes to the university or multiple universities, they'll just say like, well, Dave's the go-to guy if we have another section of whatever.
Yeah.
But literally, like I taught, I think like 120 sections of classes since 2002 on the side. So that's also been like a really cool thing. Now PhDs are often very limited in value, like, unless it's absolutely required for some licensure or something like that. But to have this kind of ancillary access, because universities, if you have a PhD and you're teaching some stuff, they get different levels of reimbursement from the feds, and also certain programs have to have a PhD ratio. So I help them out with that, and they help me out, with some courses that then, I'm dealing with higher, graduate level students. You're not dealing with people who aren't going to submit their work to you. They're already to the stage where they kind of know how the system works. But oh man, that is insane.
Well, so I want to just add something real quick,
to
what we were talking about. And this makes me so happy when this type of stuff happens. I may have mentioned it earlier. I have seen a serious upkick in bartering. See, Yeah, you can't tax bartering, which is why it's so great. Like neither party who, sells their service is subject to paying any taxes on income. So, I'm not going to lie. I had a black market haircut, back in May because one of my stylists was willing to do it. Things like that, just find a way you can trade services. And that's really something that I'm trying to encourage everybody to do, especially with all this going on.
That makes a lot of sense. Morgan Rogue was doing a show. I don't know if it's out yet, specifically on what has value and what can you barter.
Yeah,
and things that you wouldn't ever think of, but kind of like you were saying. And then like my neighbor too. There's certain tools, different types of chainsaws and stuff like that. He's like, hey, if you ever need like this, just borrow it. Like, just come over and ask me. And I'm like, and of course, initially it's kind of like, nah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a guy thing to go and ask you for like, the bigger or like, and he's like, dude, no, like I've got this, my power washer's smaller. He's got like this big industrial friggin' thing. He's a big 2-story house I've ran. She's like, hey, this would be perfect. Like you power wash once a year. You're deciding if these extensions would be easier. He's like, dude, it doesn't get used otherwise. Just like go, let me know, and you can just use it. Yeah, I have to go get some. I have to go get some firewood too, and he's gonna loan me a truck, to go get that. And I don't know. I guess what I'm loaning back. I got to think on that part. What I can trade back there. Actually, I did mow his lawn like one time, I think when he was gone this summer. Like I said, I'll just go and clear it off and take care of your lawn. But I think that's a good point of like what really has value. And I know people will say, well, gold and silver and things like that. But I think this is a different discussion of what are some things and services that have value that you can give back and forth to people. Because actually, I have this where there's somebody that will kind of proofread some like journal articles and stuff that I'll write like before I'll submit them in. And then I'll be like, okay, I'll throw some professional development materials that I'm customizing out. Now I will leave them so you can customize them to your location and you can just have them. I'm not getting paid by someone else to develop these. So it's not like they're losing money, but it's something like I've been working on. And here, like, if you're willing to do this for me, I'll do this for you. This is completely, an off record type of thing.
I just want to get it on record. So I have never once bartered with any of those ladies I was telling you about earlier. That's not something I want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Chad, going back, I want to recap a couple things. First is thank you, so much for being on the show. I always appreciate when you're on with Aaron.
Yeah.
I always do. But so, one of the things I'm going to come back to a few things, but I think it's absolutely fascinating when you mentioned the virtual reality bar. So the virtual reality bar, again, describing that's a place where people would go to play VR games at like stations. So it's kind of like like a table they would be at. Like if you were to describe what it looks like, what did it look like when it was a VR bar?
It's like each little slot so they had a bar where you could get drinks and everything. And each little slot where people would take the VR and just sit or whatever, it was kind of like a line of phone booths, but they were bigger. You could spread out. They had a desk. It's a private type of room. And I guess I just thought that was really clever of them to completely pivot into like it being a virtual office because, there's 6 feet. There's 6 feet of space when you consider that like there's a wall between everything. So you can like socially distance in there and you shut the door. And I didn't think they would make it work because where I live is not a place where there's a lot of commercial activity, at least in the traditional sense. But it sounds like they completely managed to make the change. So now they're just virtual office space and not, virtual reality. Kind of crazy.
That's absolutely amazing because I think part of what plays into that, and I mentioned it before, is this whole thing, Parkinson's theory of saying that, if you have a defined start and end process to your day, which again is they have to go there, they go through the door, they go to the station, they set up their lab. This is a start. The people function really much better in a work setting that has that component to it. So to me, that also conveys, we're into this crowd in theory, and people are trying to impose this stuff, and not that it's good or bad. It just indicates we're in a different phase than what we were before. That's absolutely unreal. And going back again, so a client who would be working as a cam girl in 2019, like I get what's the difference in income from 2019 to 2020 because of coronavirus? Whether you want to give a number, or whether you want to say it's up threefold, it's up fivefold, but I mean, how has that changed?
So at least what's on paper, and remember, they probably made a lot more than the paper I ever got to see, but from what I'm seeing, it's been consistently double. And some of these are not trivial amounts that they're getting. I guess it's the one that confuses me the most, because why would you pay for this artificial connection? Like, if you're a guy, you're not getting anything out of this. So I don't get it. And I've even asked one of them, I'm like, is there a typical type of client that does this? And she says it's mostly like older married people.
Right.
Yeah. So take that for whatever it means, but that's what's going on. About double.
So about double of what they were making.
Yeah,
so,
I'd say about double.
So you said 5,000 a month. So like maybe 10,000 a month now.
So the best one among the group is making easily 10,000 a month just from doing this, but taking her clothes off and working whenever she wants to work. It's really something.
Wow. On that John Ronson on, the last days of August, he was interviewing to some of the content producers, and he'd say, like, what are some of the requests? And they're like, it's all over the place. Like, some guy emailed or postal mailed a stamp collection worth $5,000 and wanted me to burn it and laugh at it as I was burning it and make this video about that. And it was because deep down inside, he felt he had wasted money and time, collecting all of this stuff. And this was then his way to feel good about seeing it burn. And he wasn't the one doing it. And it was just this stuff. But, I'm not out, it's just interesting to observe from a sociological perspective. And as you said, I think that is really fascinating to bring that out and bring that, I think, forward into the book. Are you concerned at all? How far is this Best Buy stuff in Chicago from like where you live? And I guess, is that as crazy as it is on the news, or is that kind of more, well, it's a Best Buy, but things otherwise are pretty level?
So that happened overnight, Sunday into Monday. That was still kind of closer to downtown. That was never a threat. But I want to tell you about what was happening, in early June, when everybody was over here riding. This was scary. So my office, it's not a storefront. I'm in a secure building. It's nondescript. Like, there's really nothing anybody would do to break into it because there's nothing there, that you could see. So I remember I was in my office pretty late working when these riots were on, full blast. And I never thought that they were going to get as far as where my office is. I was literally like, I heard this bad noise. It was a ton of people that I could tell some bad stuff was about to happen. I turned off the light in my office. I was kind of peering over the window. There's a T-Mobile across the street. There's a Japanese restaurant, and there's like a beauty salon all lined up. Oh my God, man. They just absolutely destroyed these businesses, and they were just taking rocks and bricks. And then they were walking out with phones from T-Mobile, and I don't know why they busted the restaurant and the spa, but yeah, they didn't care. They just totally destroyed these things.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And I had seen something earlier where there was some guy, in some window that yelled out, we support you guys. And then somebody threw a brick right through their window. That's why I turned off the light, because I don't want any risk of that. Not that they could reach that high, but still.
So that got pretty close to you, actually.
It was right outside my office door.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So that's June 1st, I think it was. But yeah, that's when I was just like, this has to be the worst year ever. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the morning that Kobe died. And then I was like, damn it, and I went
When
out for
was that? I don't even remember when that was, honestly.
oh, I don't know. I want to say something like a January 28th.
So it was in 2020.
Yeah,
I couldn't even remember
it was.
that.
It was.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, God damn it. So I went out for a run and I was like, it just had a kind of a weird feel to it.
Yeah.
Like that was, that was followed up by just this so we were booked to fly from Milwaukee to Orlando to spend a week at Disney in the middle of March. And so Disney closed 2 days before we were set to arrive. And so that whole week prior, like things are starting to get really sketchy. I'm watching and I'm like, oh, damn it. NCAA is shutting down, like some other stuff. So then I'm like, who do we know who's in Orlando, like the Orlando area? Like if we had to get out of there, or like what's the condition? Well, we know this relative and they have like the van that they could loan us to like get back. And then I'm doing all these contingencies and stuff like that. And then of course, everything shut down and we didn't go. But I knew some people who were down there the last week, like when they announced it was going to close, and they're like, yeah, like half the people showed up to work, and it was weird, like because everybody knew like it was shutting down and people didn't want to be there. So, and of course, like who's going to go to Disney now? This is every day in my inbox. Hey, Dave, how about you guys ready to come back? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Why would it's crazy. I mean, I don't want to have our pictures at Disney in a mask when it's 100 degrees and then have these additional conditions and hours. And I'm like, no, I'm glad we did it. And I drove actually in 2017 we went down, and I drove because I wanted the control over versus airlines and stuff like that. But I'm like, as a dad, and just I wouldn't give up that locus of control anymore of putting my transportation into other people's hands and where I'm staying and stuff. So, but when you're so Joe Dolio is, he was in the chat before, but Joe Dolio has Tactical Wisdom. It's a blog, and he talks about, what if you are in your office and a riot starts outside? Because in Detroit, where he's at, he said it was happening in Kroger parking lots. So you'd be in shopping and you'd come out, and then the parking lot would have a protest, so suddenly you didn't know about it. It shows up, people are going vehicle to vehicle. Police are kind of standing back. I mean, would you have just camped out at your office that night, or how did you extricate yourself from that kind of subtly of like being like, hey?
Well, they left and went somewhere else to riot after a while. But I mean, I have a couch in my office. I've spent nights there before during busy season, so I wasn't worried about that at all. But it's just I never thought I would see this mob coming in that area and just destroying everything around it. It's pretty surreal.
Has it been replaced, or is it just all plywood right now?
They did eventually. So it was boarded up for a while. I think they wanted to see if there were going to be any other riots. But after a couple of weeks, it opened up again. And what I think is bad is that Best Buy, there was a Binny's, which is a liquor store, and then that Best Buy that you saw in the news a few days ago on Monday.
Right.
I'm almost positive that those same stores got like absolutely obliterated a couple months before that with the riots. So imagine having to deal with that twice. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. And especially, I mean, they're at least, it's a bigger maybe box, store and different insurance and not smaller stuff. But yeah, I don't know how in the world, you bounce back when it's that. I've talked to people who have natural disaster stuff, whether it be wildfires. I had on a guy who was Alaskan crab boater, and then he started a cement company, and then it was in Canada, and then a wildfire came through and like burned up all the equipment and everything like that, and they couldn't even get to it for several days. And he's like, God, then had to start over. And of course, you have insurance, but a lot of this equipment you customize out over time, and just to try to replace these big cement machines is a big process. But but he said it was so defeatist, but he bounced back. But it was one of these things too, where you don't expect it to happen, 2 months later. And of course, when things are at the control of humans and not nature, it's really hard to process. Like, why would people do this? Versus just like, it's force majeure. It's this act of God. This, God. Hey, let me check the chat here. So we have, what is this? Cold steel was on sale for $21, a no-brainer. That's too many. That sounds like a good thing. All right, oil for the Yamaha. These guys are.
Is there time for me to take a quick break, or we?
Yeah, and actually, it's up to we can get into wrap up right now. This is usually about the length of the show. We're here at about 2 hours, so I mean, I think we've really done justice to this topic. So
yeah, I should probably get going.
So cool. So hey, thank you to everybody in the chat, and thank you to Chad. Our discussion today. So Chad Elkins, CPA. Getting a perspective on what people are thinking from a fiscal sense, from an accounting sense of the coronavirus, how they're doing their life. I mean, it just fascinating stories that you've shared. So I appreciate that. And yeah, that is. I mean, when you're telling me about, I looked out the window and I'm seeing this at this T-Mobile and stuff like that. I thought this was pretty far away from where you were at. Like this was a part you'd have to be, and it would take you 15 minutes to get to this location. I didn't know. Yeah, it's something that was right close to where you're at. So man, just take care of yourself and be well. And if people surround you, just say, "Hey, it's Aaron Clary." And then when everybody turns, you just run.
They'll be like, "Okay, now we're going to bring other people to be no."
Is that Aaron Clary? So yeah, but yeah, no, I really appreciate your content. And now, Chad, is there anything you do on your own social media, or is it more where you're guesting with other people?
So a few years ago, I used to do a tax tip of the day every day on Facebook and social media on Twitter. I've quit doing that because frankly, I have more clients than I need right now. And every time I would post something on social media, it would lead to somebody seeking free advice. So I just don't do anything now. This stuff is for fun. The stuff I do with you, Aaron, I like to do it for fun.
Yeah. Hey, well, I appreciate it. So everybody, I also appreciate when you give a thumbs up to the show. Subscribers have been climbing. So, I mean, that's cool. This show's in video. I'll release it in audio. There's a corresponding blog post that I'll write for this, and then all 147 episodes. And it's a wide range. So it's cool stuff to have on when you're working on something else to have on in the background. And so it's just some really incredible interviews. So again, appreciate the subscribes, the thumbs up. And Chad, stay safe. We are going to end the broadcast, but I want to touch base with you after this one. So we will out this here at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take care, everybody. This has been the Safety Doc Podcast with our good friend Chad Elkins.
See y'all.